Good morning. It's Saturday. This is Jason Dean coming live from Film Fanatic headquarters. It is Saturday at 9:48. Pretty nice day, I guess. Today it's in November here, November 8th. So yeah, Thanksgiving Turkey Day will be approaching before we know it. So I'm excited to. I'm gonna go with some friends tomorrow to go see the new Predator Badlands movie. Very, very excited to see that movie. I just did a show. It's just, I think, I just uploaded the video, but I did a big show on kind of my anticipation to see Predator Badlands. The films that I really love in the franchise, mainly being the first one with, of course, Schwarzenegger, and then the last film in the franchise, Prey, which I thought was just awesome. Those are my two favorite films in the franchise, easily, hands down. And this is the same creative team behind Prey, so we'll see. I'm excited. I think it looks great. It's gotten some really good buzz. You never know; it might not be great. It might be whatever, but I'm excited to see it. It's definitely a movie to be seen because Prey was not originally, you could not see it in the theater. It was a Hulu original, I believe, and it was only streaming. And then over time there was a demand for a physical media release, which initially it wasn't going to get. And then it did. And it was a hugely successful film, but because of the wave that movie has been on, and it's still a movie that's talked about, which I think it totally deserves. I bought it on Blu-ray earlier this year, and it's awesome. I mean, I love that movie, and I think it's just as good as the original. And I love that the first Predator and then Prey are like truly standalone standalone movies, and that's really what it should be. I think even when it comes to a franchise, because I think too often going into a movie, you need to know too many things about the origins, or have have had to see everything in that universe, movies and TV shows and books, to understand what the hell's going on in that particular movie. And I think a good movie should be just a good movie at the end of the day. It shouldn't really, you should be able to walk into, if something's good and it's well done and it's got some passion behind it, you should be able to just walk in off the street and not knowing shit from Shimola and just have that experience. It's not an intellectual thing. It's not like, it should be. I remember one time when one of the biggest examples of that for me was like many years ago, which I think is one of the greatest comic book movies ever made. Logan came out with Hugh Jackman, which is really its own, like a movie about Wolverine, played by Hugh Jackman, but it's its own standalone film, and it's just such an incredible movie. But I remember years ago, I got to see that in the theater, and my girlfriend at the time, we ended up going together, and I kind of dragged her to the movies to go see it. And it was funny because she, at that time, hated comic book movies, hated everything tied to comic books. The only comic book hero or movie that she kind of liked a lot was the first Spider-Man with Tobey Maguire. Outside of that, she hated, all of the different comic book movies. She had no interest in it at all, didn't like comic books themselves, all these things. So she was really reluctant to go see Logan because, again, it is based on the story of, or is a story of Wolverine from the X-Men. And so I'm on the other side of the fence. I love comic book movies. It's been pretty rough lately, I think, still. There's been some good, better movies that have come out, but I'm still on the fence. I'm not back 100%. So, so anyway, the girlfriend at the time was dead set, dead, so dead against going to see this movie because it was a comic book movie. And I remember I had to like kind of convince her, like, well, I think this might be different. I think this might be its own kind of self-contained movie or film. And it looks really great. I had heard a lot of good things about it, and I said that this is going to be, it's a comic book movie, but I think it's going to be really unique, and I think it's going to be, kind of its own experience. So then after we talked about it, she decided she said yes, and then we went to it, and we went to the theater to see Logan. I think it was opening weekend. She was really into movies too at the time, and we went to it and saw it. I think it was like opening weekend, and she absolutely loved it. She thought it was fantastic. And to me, the thing that was so great about that film was that it was truly its own thing, its own standalone film. And I think, that's a rule, like a golden rule. I kind of feel like that should be applied to every movie that's made, especially in a franchise. It should be, like music. You get a bunch of musicians in a room creating something, and then you get a bunch of people trying to create a movie, or a writer sitting at a table with a cup of coffee and a pad of paper. There's all these, obviously all these other variables around that, but at the heart of the essence of that, I think, is, well, all those people were all just they're all just trying to tell a good story that like can absorb the audience and take people away for a couple hours, but do something creative that can just tell a good story. That's it. It's not intellectual. It's not some, it's not so a lofty, it's not some kind of, lofty idea or high concept idea. It's like, and I think that sometimes, well, I don't think sometimes, but that really gets in the way of a lot of films today, and problems with certain kinds of franchises. But I'm excited to see Badlands. I'm really excited. So we're gonna go see it tomorrow night at like the 6:30 show at Flagship, and I got a little crew of people going, and I'm gonna do an obvious review for it after I see it. So we'll see how it goes. Fingers crossed. It's good. And it opened last night, I believe. And today's show is on. Again, I just recorded it, and then I'm in the process of uploading it. It'll probably will be up tomorrow morning, Sunday. But I wanted to talk about, do a couple of shows on two movies in particular, but well, I should say in particular two movie soundtracks. The movies I absolutely love to death, but it's really the soundtracks that I love even more than the films. And for me, it was such a pivotal thing for me, where it connected with me in such a way, a deeper level, connected at a deeper level for me, and it's really related to, for what it is, the weird little band that I have with Quantum. These two movies, and in particular these two soundtracks, were key. Really the key factors for me to actually kind of make this weird little stupid thing that I do in Quantum a reality. It kind of was, going into it, I never really, it was something I wanted to do. I had played in a band played in different bands for a long time, and I had not really done any original music in a long time. I had done some in the past, but it had been years, and especially I had been sitting on this feeling, or these feelings, for so long of wanting to write electronic music, which I hadn't really done. I'd done some music in the past that had those elements, but never a fully realized project. And I always wanted to do it, but I just didn't know how to do it. What do I need to do it? Do I do it by myself? Do I put together a band? And then if I do, like, is it something I'm going to do like in a live setting, or just so many questions. And then not knowing what kind of gear to get, what is the best gear to try. all these things. So for me, it was like, well, like anything, trial and error. Just trying different things and throwing things to the wall. And it's like when I think about the band Quantum, like there's a lot of things I'm really really proud of, and that I'm excited that we've been able to do, and certain albums that we've done. I'm really excited, but I never feel like I'm comfortable where I'm at. I'm always trying to move it forward, and I still think it's like I never feel like we've arrived as a band. It's still developing. I hope, and it's still changing and morphing, and facets of it are hopefully getting better. But I never feel like it's arrived, and I'm complacent. I'm always trying to move forward. But like well, it was really three experiences that like put it together for me, as far as, okay, I don't know what the fuck I'm gonna do, but regardless, I'm gonna make it happen. I remember years ago, before I started Quantum, I was in a band for a very long time, called the 220s, and we we started out as kind of like well, I guess more or less as a classic rock band. We did classic rock covers, and then we started doing more kind of contemporary rock covers, like bands like Weezer and things like that. And I think we did like a couple of Nirvana songs. But we were a cover band, and it was me on drums, Joel Watson on guitar, just phenomenal guitar player. James Taylor on bass, phenomenal bass player, and then Ian Maddox played guitar, another phenomenal musician, and he also played keys. And then also Gordon McLaughlin was kind of the front man of the band, and he played keyboards and played guitar and was a really good singer and had just really great, fantastic energy. He was such a great front man. And we basically, all of us were friends, and we kind of like put together the band, and that's kind of where the 220 started. And we started playing in like local little bars, and we had these little, like, a few kind of bar gigs, and then we had a few restaurant gigs and all of these things. It was pretty good. I remember the first time. It's so funny because the first time our first gig ever was like a total disaster. Our first couple of gigs were just total like shit shows and total disasters, but we kept pushing on somehow. And again, we eventually became a trio, but we were a four piece for, I think, a couple of years. And I remember we had our first gig was down in Searsport, actually where Hay Sailor is. It was right down the street from where Hay Sailor is, and this was quite a few years ago. And one of the guys in the band, I think it was Ian Maddox, he lived right next to this venue, which I can't remember the name of it, but it was a restaurant and it had a bar, and it was going to be our first gig as a band. And we'd started rehearsing, here and there, and we had like a set of covers. And they had this idea of, because it was going to be our first gig, like, let's rehearse the day of the show, and then we'll pack up our gear and then just go and play, and we'll be warmed up and all that kind of thing. And Ian's house was literally, two houses down from the venue. And we thought, okay, this would be a good thing, because we were nervous. It was a new band, and we can, like, we'll be hopefully warmed up and all that kind of shit. So we showed up, I don't know, like in the afternoon, got together, and we had a rehearsal. We rehearsed for a couple hours, and during rehearsal, we kind of got lost track. We lost track of time, and we realized, oh wait, it's getting close to showtime to play our first gig. We should start packing up. And we got totally screwed, and we got to the gig super late. We ended up like getting there and we had to bring a PA, and it was a big band. It was a lot of gear, and we got to our first gig. It was supposed to be, it was our first show ever as a band, and we had rehearsed a lot, had all this material, and we got to the gig about 20 minutes before we were supposed to play. And I never forget, like, because we were just dilly dallying and fucking off. I couldn't believe we were like doing this. Like, this was like so unprofessional and so stupid. But we got to the gig and totally running late. We had to set up a PA and everything. And I remember, never forget, like, we walked into the venue, and the first person we see is the booking agent, the manager who booked the band. He just like looked at us like, you guys are such douchebags. Like, what the hell are you doing? And nevertheless, like, he was pissed, and they were all pissed at us. And then we ended up busting our ass to set up, and it was so, stressful. And then we set up all of our gear, and then we ended up starting. I think the show time was like 6 o'clock, and then we didn't get started till about 6:45, and then we ended up playing, and then it went okay considering it was a clusterfuck. But they never hired us again there. We never got another gig there because they were pissed off at us, And we did show up and we did play, but it was a shit show, and that was our first show. And then I remember we played at another gig in Belfast at Bowen's Tavern, which was like this really kind of stupid like dive bar, although it was kind of fun at times. But it was this total dive bar in Belfast. We played like our second gig there, and there was like this massive like fight that started there, where one of the guys got thrown through the glass, and it was a total shit show. And that was like our second gig. But then we ended up playing a few other gigs there, and then fast forward, we eventually became a trio, and went on to do more covers. We got well known for a while with doing lots of Pink Floyd covers, and then we started doing this thing of like trying to cover full albums of kind of classic albums. And then we eventually slowly got away from that and started doing original tunes. And there was a bunch of issues with personality, a lot of personality conflicts, and then ended up quitting the band. And then that band at that time was such a commitment, and we were really busy. We definitely had some really great periods. Like, the music we did was very challenging. It really pushed us, and we did. I think for what it was, at one, for a few years, we were starting to get some pretty good success, like getting fans and getting people's attention. We worked really hard, but things came up personality wise, and ended up having to leave the band. And that band was at one point so busy that I wasn't doing anything else but that band, but the 220s. Like, I remember having to turn down offers to play with other people and other gigs. Like, we were at one point rehearsing 2 or 3 times a week and then playing every weekend for a few years straight. So it was like, it was definitely a committed thing, but it was good. We had a good run. But suddenly, when it was all gone, I was like, I had nothing. I had absolutely nothing going on. And then I started thinking, well, okay, maybe now I can start this idea, maybe venture into this idea for this electronic thing that that I'd kind of always been thinking about. Always, I had always been a massive fan of electronic music, and I wanted to try it out. So suddenly I had all this time, and I started doing some research in what kind of gear I could get. And I remember one time, it was actually at a 220s gig. We were down in Portland playing a gig, I think, at the Big Easy, which is now the Portland House of Music. And we got down to the venue early, and we had some time, so we went to like Guitar Center in Portland, which is a really awesome shop in Portland. And they had this one area in the store where it was all electronic instruments, and everything was set out for display. And so they had this Chaosilator drum machine set up, and it was all set up to play. And I remember playing it, and I just was like enamored with it. And I fell in love with the sound of it. And to me, it was like, okay, this is maybe what I can get for a gear, for a gear to start this new thing that I had. So, fast forward, got some gear, and Did all these different things, configurations, and built a little set. Had a gig, had my first gig playing on a radio show as this like little goal to see if I can do it. Did all these things. But during that transition time, again, when I saw Social Network and the directed by David Fincher and and hearing the soundtrack for that for that film by David Fincher, I mean by Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross, that was this thing that was like this green light for me. And then also the movie which I'm going to be talking about today, Ryan Gosling's Drive, which also came out 2011, came out virtually the same year. When I saw both of those movies and the combination of the music and the whole like aesthetics, all the aesthetics in those movies, I was like, this is it. Like it was, it kind of put me over that hump of like not being sure, and I was like, okay, I got to do this. I don't know what it's going to be or how it's going to pan out, but I'm going to make it happen. And the Social Network soundtrack and the Drive soundtrack, as well as both of those movies, were the two big factors that kind of put me kind of in the driver's seat to make it happen, to make quantum eventually become a thing. So today's show is on Drive, which is I'm a really big I'm actually a really big Ryan Gosling fan. I think he's such an incredibly versatile actor. I think he's great at playing action films. I think he's actually really funny. I think he's super versatile. I've always been a big fan of his work, but my favorite movie of his, I have to say, is Drive. When I first saw that movie, it just blew me away. It came out in 2011, and he essentially Ryan Gosling plays this stunt driver who gets involved with this crime heist and gets involved with these like gangsters and gets into some really terrible, life-threatening shit. But it is such an amazing film. It was directed by Nicholas Winding Refn, who is such an incredible director. My favorite film of his is easily Valhalla Rising. That movie is Mads Mikkelsen is in that film. That movie is one of the most badass movies ever made. He also did Bronson, which is just fantastic, starring Tom Hardy. He's made some pretty incredible films, but his films are very intense, very visceral, definitely have this art house quality. But the first film of his that I ever saw was Drive. And I was just blown away by it because the soundtrack was so powerful. The music had all this really cool kind of dark wave synth stuff. Very 80s sounding and but with uber violent, very really dark film, and again I just became enamored with this movie. I only have it on, which is kind of a shame, but I only have Drive on DVD. I haven't actually seen it in a long time, but the soundtrack is something I've like listened to an ungodly amount of times, and also the same with Social Network. I think it's some of the best soundtrack work ever made for a film. Like it really is. Like I said, when I first saw Social Network, I was like, wow, music is can be even more powerful than I thought. And especially in regards to telling a story. I think in both movies, the music is so powerful that it acts as its like own character. And then after that, after seeing Drive, I got more into Nicholas Refn's films and became a huge fan. I highly recommend Valhalla Rising. That movie is, well, it's easily probably the best movie he's ever done. Even though Drive is so great, that Valhalla Rising's at a next level. It's a hard movie to find, but I highly recommend it. It is such an intense movie, and it's kind of this Viking saga as well. Amazing film. Um, but yeah, Drive is such an amazing movie, and the soundtrack, The cast is just so damn good. Um, the soundtrack, absolutely incredible. The soundtrack was mainly composed by a composer named Cliff Martinez. There are some other artists that were compiled for the soundtrack, but it's primarily Cliff Martinez. Extraordinary. I got the soundtrack. I have the Drive soundtrack on CD. And again, I just need to talk about it. I think I did do a show on Drive, the movie itself, because it is amazing. It's definitely my favorite Ryan Gosling film, and it's definitely on the top tier of some of my favorite soundtracks of all time. The cast for Drive as well is just absolutely phenomenal. Um, but the main thing today is just talking about the film score and just how powerful. Really realizing how powerful music can really be, and ever since I saw both of these films, Social Network and Drive, I it changed my perception of when I see a movie now. I'm now like even to this day, 2025, when I'm seeing a movie for the first time, I'm really trying to like pay attention to the sound, the sound design, of course, but the composer element, the soundtrack, the vibe that will kind of create, and seeing if that's, for at least for me, for what it's worth, like if that's really working. Is that something? Because that sometimes happens with soundtrack scores. The music outside of the context of the movie might not be as stimulating. In this case, I don't think that's true. I think it really is. And I like, with soundtracks, it's got to be this thing of, again, there's a fine balance when it comes to like trying to compose music for a soundtrack and motion picture. Because it's got to be. It's not the featured thing. It's not the main element. It's. I guess the best way to kind of describe it is it's like maybe a catalyst to capturing your investment in that movie. It's supposed to enhance the experience. As opposed to like, if you listen to an album, say by your favorite band, your objective in that moment is the music, and you want the music to stand out and be front and center. With soundtrack stuff, it's very different because there has to be this balance. It has to be kind of like, to a degree, like window dressing, but it has to kind of like augment the emotions or the scenes of what's happening, and it should kind of enhance the experience. But there are times, I think, when film scores don't work for movies, when it can be too kind of imposing, or just changes the mood too quickly, and it's not really working with the vibe. So there's always this like interesting balance. And then I think too, like, if you listen to a film score, it might not have that same resonance outside of the context of the movie. But I like film scores. I think good film scores should be really a balance of those things, And I think that's something, from a compositional point of view, is something to strive for. Like, I don't have like experience really being a composer. I've done a few little projects, but as far as film stuff goes, but I would think like, if I was trying to do that, like proactively and trying to venture into that, I would try to like strike that balance of, okay, I want to really try to enhance this intimate little story that's going on, heighten the mood of what's happening or what's transpiring, and make it interesting and engaging, but I don't want to be front and center. And yet, I would like the music to try to be strong enough that if people heard the music by itself, say on an album, that would still like maybe take them to those places and be interesting enough to where it is really powerful. So, but that's a balance. Again, it doesn't always work. But I think in this case with Drive and Social Network, it kind of strikes that balance, and that's kind of, I mean, in a weird way, that's kind of what I try to do with Quantum is I try to like create a space, but I'm thinking in terms of like maybe creating a vibe, but then trying to enhance it, but not like, even though it's centered on music and we do have a visual element, I'm trying to do this thing of thinking of it in terms of a movie where I don't want it to overtake what's happening, the emotions, and maybe it's not going to work. But if I am doing that, then it's working. Then I don't want that to kind of like um, overshadow the essence. And also, something outside of the live setting. If you listen to a recording of it, it would hopefully be interesting too. So, but yeah, 2011 Drive, highly recommend it. One of the best soundtracks as well. An amazing movie. So thanks again, and we will see you next time. Peace.